Playoff seeding and placing in the Atlantic Division will be put to the test as the Tampa Bay Lightning embark on a stretch of 4 straight games against Atlantic Division opponents, beginning with 2 games against the Senators at Amalie Arena. How will the Lightning do during this stretch, and who is the biggest challenge to the Bolts' playoff hopes in the Atlantic Division?
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Josh Sperber here, thanking all of you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, then this is the show for you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And we will get started by talking about a big preview for the Tampa Bay Lightning, their first of 2 games this week against the Ottawa Senators. And the Senators game is, these are going to be 2 of the biggest games of the season for the Tampa Bay Lightning. You got 2 games back-to-back against the team in the most reachable place in terms of playoff seeds right now. Currently, the Lightning are in 5th after the Red Wings win last night. The Red Wings vaulted Tampa Bay by 1 point. They have 2 games in hand over the Lightning, do the Red Wings, and 1 more loss in both regulation and overtime. The Senators just 1 more win and 2 more points than the Lightning with over a game in hand. But the Lightning have a better goal differential than both of those teams, so they're hoping that their strong offense can help out. And the power play offense is going to be another key component of this game. The Lightning 6th in the league, 26%. The Senators 9th at 23%. So 2 top 10 power play teams go head to head, but these are 2 teams that have had a very different run of games. It's been a tough month of January, as we've discussed, for the Lightning. They've only won 4 out of their last 10 games. They've won 2 of their last 5. Meanwhile, the Senators have won 4 straight, including 7 of 10, and some of these games against really good teams. The Wild, the Capitals, the Utah Hockey Club, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. The last 4 wins for the Senators. 3 of those 4 teams are currently in playoff position, with 2 of them being in the top 2 of their division, as the Maple Leafs, 2 games in hand on the Florida Panthers. They're currently 2nd in the Atlantic. The Minnesota Wild have been a big surprise this year. They're 3rd in the Central Division of the West. Utah Hockey Club is the only team outside of a playoff spot currently in those last 4 wins for Ottawa. So the Lightning are facing a Senators team that is on fire, and a Senators team that has already beaten the Lightning earlier this season. It was a road game in Ottawa. The Lightning outshot the Senators by 1 goal, but the Senators outscored the Lightning by 1 goal, thanks to Noah Gregor's game winner on a shorthanded goal in the 3rd period. And that was back in October. Obviously, 2 very different teams. J.J. Moser was practicing with a couple of Lightning players yesterday, not at practice. Moser was practicing with some of the offensive players. So that could mean he's either still filling in, or it's going to be even longer. Or it could mean that he's filling in and he's just about getting ready, or it's just a fill-in because the Lightning were missing a couple people during practice yesterday. But it's happened before. Nikita Kucherov has missed practice or morning skate and still come to the game the next day. He was one of the players absent from the initial practice. So we'll keep monitoring that with practice tomorrow. You can get updates on our X page at LO_Lightning. As soon as we get them following morning skate tomorrow. But I mean, I'll say it once and I've said it again. I've said it. This is a must-win game for the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially starting off a run of games against the Senators again, and then a weekend back-to-back on the road against Detroit and Montreal. Obviously, you want to see the Lightning win both of these games, but that's not something that is easy. That's easy to control. But the Lightning need to have pucks need to start falling in net for the Lightning. Obviously, that's been the main concern of these Bolts over the past few weeks when they've had difficulty finding the back of the net from their shooting. You hope that those shooting woes can get fixed tomorrow night, because I think a win to start off this difficult 4-game set, I believe it's the longest stretch of the season where the Lightning are consecutively playing teams from their own division. And it's at such a critical time in the season where the Lightning have certainly been facing a lot of adversity with their offensive woes lately, the injuries to so many key players, whether it's sporadic, like we've seen, just guys missing games here and there, or guys like J.J. Moser, who have been out for close to 2 months now. The Lightning have been hit with the injury bug. They've had an offense that has slipped from the highest scoring offense in the league to now the third highest scoring offense in the league. Their power play has dropped down. They were as high as third or fourth at one point. Now they're down at fifth. I mean, the Lightning are in a difficult stretch of the season, but this is the part of the calendar where you have to just forget about any of the other games that you've played before and just muscle up to get yourself into a good position for the playoffs. Because right now, the Atlantic Division in that fourth playoff spot is as tight as any division in the National Hockey League, and probably even tighter. Right now, the Lightning and Bruins are at 58 points, with the Red Wings in fourth at 59. The Canadiens are in seventh at 53. And even the Sabres at 47, still 12 points out of a playoff spot right now. But, I mean, there's enough time in the season that you can't entirely count them out. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next segment, but I mean, it's just a key point in the season that you really have to look at the other divisional teams a lot more closely. And if you're playing these other divisional teams, they're just games that you have to win. And the Lightning really had an answer for just about everything that the Senators threw at them when the Lightning went to Ottawa back in October. But that Noah Gregor shorthanded goal really, I think, put Ottawa over the edge, because towards the end of the second period, Brady Tkachuk hit a power play goal that gave Ottawa the lead for good. Noah Gregor's shorthanded goal in the third sealed it. And Mitchell Chaffee ended up tipping in a shot later in that third period. But without that shorthanded goal, that could have been a very different game. And we're seeing a lot less of those against the Lightning's power play. So that is definitely a good sign. But it's going to be another case where power plays are going to play a big role in this game. You want to see Andrei Vasilevsky stay hot, and you want to see the Lightning's first line forwards just absolutely dominate, because at that point in the season, I don't think the full strength of that first line had been unlocked. It was the first goal of the year for Jake Gensel. Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov, by the end of that game, had 2 assists apiece. Kucherov scored and put up another assist in that game. So I think that really kind of signified the start of, wow, this entire line is just going to make a huge impact, because that was one of the first games where all three, Gensel, Kuch, and Point, all put up at least 1 point in the same game. And definitely, I think the first time that they all combined on a goal for that Lightning first line of forward. So they're really going to need to take over the game, I think, against this Senators team that has a goals against per game average of 6th. The Lightning of 267 is the exact average, but the Senators are a defensive-minded team. And, you know, there are a lot of people who talk about those offense versus defense games. The one that comes to mind for me was that Super Bowl. I know this is a different sport, but Peyton Manning and the number 1 offense against Seattle and the number 1 defense, and it ended up with Seattle beating them, I think 43-8 was that final score. That Super Bowl was over 10 years ago, which is scary in a different way. But the point I'm trying to make is defensive teams tend to have the advantage over offensive teams. And the Lightning, the best way I think they can buck that advantage, aside from just playing good defense, you know, you want to have that defense consistent. And if Moser's starting to practice again, that really has to keep the confidence flowing from the Lightning defenders. And maybe he'll even be in this game. There have been no signs that we're going to see J.J. Moser on Tuesday night, but it does seem like his comeback is getting closer and closer and closer. And that could certainly help with the Lightning's defensive consistency, assuming he won't be there for the Tuesday game, though. the Lightning will have to play with the six that they've played in the last few games, and just hope that they can get a solid game at home. Defensively, the Lightning have played significantly better at home for the most part, so we want to see one of those games. But another big key, of course, is that first line dominating. Obviously, I talked yesterday about Kucherov being, what makes he's the engine of the Lightning. I mean, he's what makes the team go. He is always a guy who can take control, and if he takes over a game, bringing in Gensel and Point for extra scoring options, that first line just having a dominant performance and a takeover could really change the outcome of that game. But the next segment, we're going to talk about things on a wider scale. We've talked about the Lightning's game against Ottawa. Now we're going to look at the rest of the division. The Lightning are certainly in the driver's seat when it comes to that fourth spot or maybe even the third spot in the Atlantic Division. But which teams are the biggest threat to the Tampa Bay Lightning? And some of them you might see this week. Super Bowl 59 is here on Sunday. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature on FanDuel helps you stay involved no matter what goes on the field. And this app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets to the Super Bowl, and that's just icing on the cake. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. And we've also got some odds for the next game. The Lightning slightly favored over the Ottawa Senators with the over-under set at 5.5. It is favored to go over that 5.5 goal mark. Lines are open for Tuesday's game between the Lightning and the Senators on FanDuel.com. So this next segment looks kind of weird, I'm sure, to a bunch of you, but it does seem kind of early to be talking about the biggest threat in the Atlantic Division. But the Lightning are playing the teams who may be the biggest threat in the Atlantic Division to them in this next week. 2 games against the Senators, 1 game against the Red Wings, and another one against the Canadiens. Now, the Canadiens aren't one of those teams. Obviously, I don't need to list all those big threats to the Lightning. And right now, I'm looking at the Senators, the Red Wings, and the Boston Bruins, closest to the Lightning in terms of points right now. The Bruins, I don't think are a threat. I think they're going to fall down to 7th by the end of the season. They're currently in 6th with the most games played of anyone, tied with the Florida Panthers at 54, and they have 58 points, which is tied for 5th in the division with the Lightning. With the Lightning having played 3 fewer games, they get the edge over Boston in the divisional standings. The Detroit Red Wings, 4th at 59 points with 2 games played more than the Lightning. The Senators, 2 points ahead of the Lightning in 3rd with 1 more game played than Tampa, and 2 dates against the Lightning in Amalie Arena on Tuesday and Thursday this week. So I think the Bruins you can take off because, like the Detroit Red Wings, the Bruins got a new coach. But since they got that new coach, things really haven't improved all that much. It's just been kind of stagnant for Boston, and they've kind of continued the downturn that they started on at the beginning of the season. There's a difference when that happens opposed to what happened with the Red Wings when they got their new coach. They played 18 games with them, the Lightning, and the Red Wings are 14-4. And currently, if the season ended today, the Red Wings would be in the playoffs. And the Red Wings are a team that has beaten the Lightning in Detroit. 2 very different games for Detroit against Tampa. And that 2-0 shutout was certainly a big one. Only two teams the Lightning have only been shut out once this season. And to do that on your home ice, even anywhere, to do that against the Tampa Bay Lightning, at that point, they were the top team in the league in terms of goals per game when they were shut out by the Red Wings. That's no easy feat. To shut out the top offense in the league, you have to be doing something right. And the Red Wings certainly are. They're on the biggest hot streak of their season. They play the Lightning 2 more times this year. And I think, to me, over the long term of the season, they're the biggest threat to the Lightning, because the Senators, I think, match up well against the Lightning. But right now, you have to say that they're the Lightning's biggest threat, because 2 wins or 2 losses can do 2 very different things to the Lightning in these next 2 games. And a split might not be super helpful either, because it puts the standings right back where they are today in terms of the Senators and the Lightning. So obviously you want 2 wins in a row if you were the Lightning, but right now, I think just because of recency bias and the fact that the Lightning are playing the Senators twice over the next 3 days, right now the Senators, I think, are definitely the bigger threat to the Lightning. I'm not saying that the Red Wings are a better team than Ottawa right now, because I think that is certainly up for debate. I know I'm a big fan of Tim Stützle on the Senators. Jake Sanderson's having a great season. Brady Tkachuk, obviously one of the better players in the league. Linus Ullmark has lived up to the billing after that big offseason acquisition from Ottawa. I mean, they've got a really good compilation of players, especially on the offensive side, but their defense has really been really been their best attribute this season. So right now, I think with 2 games this week, the Senators are the biggest threat. Over the course of the season, though, the team I think I'm most worried about is the Red Wings. The Red Wings and the Senators, I think, are both difficult for the Lightning. With the Senators, it's a defensive-minded team versus an offensive-minded team, and that could be tricky. But at the same time, that's just as likely to go chalk in terms of defense winning as it is for the Lightning to have another one of their offensive explosions. And I've been saying this for the last couple of days. The Bolts are just due. It's been so difficult to get the pucks in the net, and they've been getting their good chances. For the most part, they've outshot their opponents over the entire year of 2025. But right now, just pucks haven't been falling in for the Lightning. And that's going to be tough to do against the Ottawa Senators. But I think just overall, the Red Wings are a team that you have to be scared of if you're in the Atlantic Division right now, because, Detroit is one of the hottest teams in the league. They're currently on the longest win streak in the NHL. The only other team with an active win streak of 6 games or more, the Winnipeg Jets, who have the best record and most points in the NHL, but 2 more points of the Capitals, who have 2 games in hand compared to the Winnipeg Jets. So I think the Lightning are still going to make the playoffs, but there is a real possibility that by the end of the season, the Red Wings and the Senators could be 3-4. But I still think the Lightning are going to be a playoff team in the Atlantic Division this year. I think that is a reachable goal for the squad. I think on paper they stack up better than pretty much they really look better than every team in this division, aside from maybe the Panthers and the Maple Leafs. On paper, the Lightning, I think, are the 3rd best team in this division right now, and that's where I think I'd want to see the Lightning at the end of the season. But they're going to have to beat some of their divisional teams to do it, and especially a winning record over these next 4 games would be huge. It'll be a different conversation during 4 Nations if the Lightning end up with a losing record over the next 4 games, because that will be a pretty big problem, not just for the Lightning in giving up points that, you really want to get against your division, but obviously if they don't get them, their divisional team will. And that is just big trouble. It's at the point of the season where points in the standings are just more difficult to make up, plain and simple. So the Lightning really have to focus on getting pucks in the net against these Senators. The next 3 games, the Lightning are playing the 2 biggest threats to their playoff candidacy and playoff position in the Ottawa Senators and the Detroit Red Wings. Montreal Canadiens, I think, are a dark horse, but they need a big late run and a lot of help. But right now, the Senators and Red Wings should be scary to Lightning fans because they're on the rise, and the Lightning need to make a statement in these next couple of games that they're still here. They're still one of the expected playoff teams from the Atlantic Division, along with Florida and Toronto. They don't want anyone coming for their crown, and the Lightning need to show that against Ottawa, against Detroit, and then against Montreal over the course of this next week. Now, the next segment is going to be the oddest one of all. The backup goalie situation for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Is it going to be Jonas Johansson, or is it going to be someone from the Syracuse Crunch who finishes the season backing up Andrei Vasilevskiy? Josh Sperber here for one final segment of Locked On Lightning. And we're going to take a look at something that I really didn't expect to look at this season, the backup goalie situation for the Tampa Bay Lightning. We all know who the Lightning starter is, Andrei Vasilevskiy, one of the best goalies in the league. I'm not saying this because I think his job is in any kind of danger, because it's not. Jonas Johansson's might be, though. Johansson picked up an injury ahead of the most recent Lightning home game. He was not there again not the most recent, the second most recent, the end of January against the Kings. Jonas Johansson was out due to an injury. Matt Tompkins was called up from AHL Syracuse to replace him. And yesterday, I should say, Brandon Halverson, a guy who has been a part of the Syracuse Crunch for the last 2 seasons, was signed to a 2-way contract by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, does this put Jonas Johansson's backup job in jeopardy? And honestly, I would say yes. Even if it wasn't for the injury, I'd think that it's something that you can afford to look at for the Lightning. Brandon Halverson has had an incredible season in the AHL and has been one of the best goalies in the top minor league in hockey over the course of the season. He has played 26 games, won 12 of them, and 4 of those wins have been shutouts. A goals allowed average of .220 and a save percentage of .918, on track to be the best in his AHL career, including the 7 postseason games he played with the Crunch in last season's Calder Cup playoffs. And Brendan Halverson has been with the Lightning organization for a couple of years, but now the 2-way contract does make something a little bit shaky for Jonas Johansson. And all 3 of these guys have had NHL experience. Halverson played 1 game a couple years ago for the Rangers, the initial team that drafted him. Matt Tompkins played 6 games for the Lightning last year, and obviously Jonas Johansson is up for the Bolts. And Matt Tompkins in 17 games averaging under 3 goals allowed average with a save percentage of over .900 as the backup to Brendan Halverson. Jonas Johansson in 13 games, a save percentage under .900 and a goals allowed average of .324. And, if you can have this in the AHL, I think it's important to try and get that same kind of quality in the NHL as well. So I'd expect Jonas Johansson to be a little bit worried about his NHL job because there might be someone coming for it, and that man is Brandon Halverson, the only Crunch All-Star in the representing them in the AHL All-Star game in Brendan Halverson. And I don't think Tompkins is a threat to replace Jonas Johansson entirely because he's a little bit older. Tompkins turning 31 this year, while Brandon Halverson is going to be 29 by the end of the season. So Halverson is the youngest of those 3. Jonas Johansson is turning 30 in September. So I think Halverson is going to end up being the best choice for the Lightning backup goalie. He did sign a 2-way contract, so he can go between Syracuse and Tampa Bay. But I think his choice makes the most sense. I like Johansson. I think he's a solid backup goalie. But when you have a guy who is competing for more than that, I think Johansson at this point in his career knows that he might not be a starting goalie. But with Halverson's season this year, there could be some teams that are looking at him, and whether he's going to be playing for a little bit more because he thinks that he could earn himself a trade to somewhere, or, could earn him, get the eyes of some other team that wants him as a starting goalie. Or if it's like Halverson said before the season started, he just wants a shot back up on an NHL roster. I still think that it's the best time for him to be put on an NHL roster. And I don't know the contract story with Johansson, if he'll be able to go down to the AHL or if they'd have to release him or something. I think it would be tough to do that with JoJo. He's been a good servant of the club for the last 2 years and a solid backup goaltender over his NHL career that has lasted parts of now 6 seasons. It just seems like he's regressing a little bit this year, at least compared to last year. In 12 games, he has 6 wins, so on a similar pace, but it's the goals allowed average and save percentage taking a slight dip that are a little bit concerning. And there have definitely been some times where I'll see a shot that one of those goals against the Blackhawks is a good example where Johansson's in the net, and I'm thinking, Vasilevsky definitely would have saved that one. It's happened a couple times, and I really don't want this to sound like I'm berating Jonas Johansson because I just don't think that's the case. I just think that in a pretty low leverage position, the Lightning have a bunch of options, a couple of better options. I'm not sure Tompkins would be a better option than Johansson. He really only got his NHL time and had put up similar numbers to what Johansson is doing this year in the 6 games he played in the first half of the Lightning season last year. He was 3-2-1, 333 goals allowed average, and 892 save percentage in 6 games with the Lightning last year. Through more than double that, the goals allowed average is better for Johansson. The save percentage, though, is exactly the same. And I still don't think Tompkins deserves an NHL spot over Johansson. I'd still keep the Tomcat with the crunch in the AHL. But I do think that at least if it doesn't happen this season, because Halverson's contract takes him on a 2-way deal with the Lightning through next season, I think that battle might not get changed up that much this season, just because the Lightning have had enough moving parts going on that changing up even a position as small as the backup goalie, I think is just not what they need right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Halverson beat out JoJo for the backup goalie job next year. I think that's a legitimate possibility that at least by the start of next season, the Lightning will have a new man coming in on back-to-back road games for one of those games other than Jonas Johansson. I think that's a real possibility that it is going to be Halverson. I think he certainly has the inside track with that new 2-way deal that he just signed. And I think it's certainly a big moment for him. And it's something that I think if Halverson plays similarly to the way he's been going in the AHL, I think that it is a definite possibility that he could end up being a better goalie than Jonas Johansson. And that could only strengthen the Lightning, because there are some games, and it's happened especially on the back-to-backs in January, where it's Vasilevsky not playing, and I'm just a little bit worried because, not having Vasilevsky there is obviously going to hurt the Lightning's chances. And, again, it's not like Halverson is that much of an upgrade over Jonas Johansson and that much big. It's certainly not like he's a bigger downgrade than Johansson for Vasilevsky, but, you're still going to have a drop-off from your starting to your backup goalie. The Lightning can get a guy who's a little bit younger, certainly certainly more motivated at this current point, and on a heater. He's having what's looking like the best season of his NHL career is Brandon Halverson. So I'm thinking that he's going to want to get back he obviously wants to get back to the NHL as soon as he possibly can, but he has really been a bright spot for the Syracuse Crunch in a season that has them in the lower half of that North Division and struggling to get back in the Calder Cup playoff race. Of course, there is still a chance for the Crunch. They are the third place team in the North Division. Toronto Marlies has 54 points. The Crunch have 46. The Laval Rocket leads the North Division with 59 points, 13 more than the Crunch, with 43 games played for Syracuse. So, there's still a chance that they can catch up. Obviously, Halverson going up to the Lightning this year might hurt that. I don't know if that's going to happen for a significant amount of time, depending on how long the Johansson injury lasts. But with Tompkins going back down to the AHL, Brandon Halverson might be getting the call up as soon as tomorrow, or as soon as tonight, I should say, depending on the extent of that Jonas Johansson injury, if he's going to have to be scratched for one of the first two games against the Ottawa Senators. But that's where we'll leave you. I'll be at the stadium tonight, so come say hi if you're at Amalie Arena. And until then, give us a like, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen to our podcasts on on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, wherever you listen. We really appreciate your guys' support. And thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steel and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Once again, please give us a like, follow, and subscribe. We really appreciate your guys' support. So thank you all for tuning in once again, and go Bolts. We'll talk about the game on tomorrow's episode. But until then, have a great Tuesday.